The Leominster City Council meeting is funded in part by DeCarolis Insurance Agency at www.decarolisinsuranceagency.com and by Avidia Bank at www.avidiabank.com.
This is a Legal Affairs Committee meeting of the Leominster City Council. My name is Sue Shalafu-Zephyr. I'm the chairperson of the committee. Councilor to my right, Robert Tossi, is the second member, and Pauline Cormier, the Ward 2 councilor, is also on the committee. So this committee meeting is on petition 4125 and 4725, and the plan is to have each petitioner give a brief summary or presentation on what their petition is about, and then the council, I'll open it up to the council and the Legal Affairs Committee for questions and answers. And during subcommittee meetings, City Council subcommittee meetings, there really is not an opportunity for public input or public comment. That is usually at public hearings for each of these. And next Monday night, the planning board, both petitions are on the planning board agenda, and there are public hearings scheduled for that. And then the following Monday, on June 23rd, we have the city council public hearing on both petitions as well. So tonight is really fact-finding. It's getting information for the council from the petitioners. So because we have more than a quorum of city councilors here, I have to read this notice, which is this notice of a City Council Committee of the Whole meeting is posted in the event that a quorum of city councilors is present at the standing committee meeting. If less than a quorum of the city council is present, no committee of the whole meeting shall take place. If a quorum is present, any such meeting shall be restricted to the standing committee agenda items listed above. So first on the agenda tonight, we have petition 41-25, Lisa Nugent of 45 Beth Avenue, Leominster, requests that the City Council prohibit all horse and dog racing and any associated betting or wagering anywhere within Leominster, Massachusetts. So would you like to come to the table, Ms. Nugent? So for the record, anybody who comes up to the table to speak this evening, if you could please just identify yourself, that would be helpful. And
Lisa Nugent, 45.
That's enough.
We're all set. Let's go.
Barbara Kellogg, 9 Stetson Road, Holly, Mass. The mic's not working.
No, mine's not working.
Take some special talent.
Lisa Nugent, 45 Beth Ave, Leominster.
Thank you.
Barbara Kellogg, 9 Stetson Road, Holly.
Thank you.
We all set?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You guys received a copious amount of information from us in the packet with the initial reading, so I won't actually be redundant there. I'm here to answer any questions, but yes, we're looking to prohibit horse racing anywhere within Leominster. Obviously, there's a situation that kind of preempted this, but we're looking to make sure it doesn't happen anywhere within the city. There's considerations for the location currently with the other situation, but for this, it's based just on horse racing alone and the things that come with it. Dog racing is included. As we're all seeing right now, laws are being overturned regularly. We figure if this gets passed, we don't want to have to revisit that somewhere in the future. So anyways, the statistics, if you really dig into them, the track statistics right now, the HISA standards, you see 0.9, and that seems, well, it's not that bad, right? It's, we can live with that. I don't know, can we? If we turned around and we looked at 0.9% of all the registered dogs in Leominster, and somebody said, oh, you're going to get $1 million if you guys off 23 dogs, what would we say? Right? So it's kind of horse racing comes down to, can we live with the numbers? And those track numbers don't really show a full picture. There's about 100,000 foals, thoroughbred foals, that are cropped each year. And out of that, only 5, according to the Jockey Club, only 5 to 40% of them are good enough to race at any level. The rest of them are somewhat dispensable. The breeders are breeding mostly for speed, which, who can blame them? That's where the money is. But then that means you're ruling out health, temperament, soundness, things along those lines. So you end up with a lot of horses that don't have homes, and horses are expensive to keep. It's not easy to place them. So a lot of them are winding up. Last year alone, there was about 60,000 horses due to the thoroughbred racing industry that wound up going to slaughterhouses in Canada or Mexico. And those horses are put on transports. They do not have the same welfare rights as, say, cows or chickens or other animals that are raised for meat. They have zero welfare rights, as a matter of fact, so they get put on transports. There's no food, no water. They're transported regardless of temperatures, and pretty much that's that. So saying that we're going to capitalize on something like this just to make money, to me, it comes down, it's an ethical question. And I know that this has been said that, oh, it's about feelings. It's not about feelings. If you look in the dictionary, there's a clear distinction between morals, ethics, and feelings. Feelings are what you have about whether you do, when you do something morally good or bad. You feel good or you bad about it. Ethics is about, avoiding doing harm to something, to another person or the environment, and animals are part of the environment, and we have a moral obligation to try to protect them. So therefore, that's why this exists. So if anybody has any questions, happy to try to answer them and have some backup on that as well.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to my committee first to see if anybody has any questions. Mr. Tossi, do you have any questions?
Yes. Lisa, would you say that animal cruelty is the biggest issue you have with this track at the moment, or in general?
So horse racing in general, I mean, for me, it's what got me motivated, where the concept came from for this, but there's a lot of other aspects tied to it. As you receive in the packet, I mean, gambling is definitely on the rise, which of course the flip side of that is people can say, oh, there's lots of money to be made. But do we really, is that the kind of money that we want to make based on predatory practices? There is no, when you have an issue or a disease, there's treatments for it, there's medication for it, there's no real treatment. There's, Gambling Anonymous, but there's no real treatment if someone actually has gambling as an affliction. And as you've seen from other people who've gotten up and spoken to you, there was multiple people in the past that actually raised that concern. So that's part of it. And the fact that it's on the decline. Northern California, all of Northern California, it's a big state, this past year actually banned horse racing as a whole. So again, it's something, I understand that it's a very small percentage of what is being put in front of us right now, but this is trying to take into consideration any potential future proposals. Some of the other proposals in the past had a lot more racing involved. In upwards of, 20 or 100 race days, somewhere in between there.
Great. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Ilsa? Councilor Pauline Cormier, do you have any questions?
Thank you. Lisa, so what do you say to those of us that have heard the pushback saying, well, it's not on the, horse racing, dog racing is not on the permitted uses, so it's not permitted. So where does this petition come in?
Sure.
Certainly.
So Leominster zoning is set up so that you have permitted uses, and if it's not there, then it's considered not permitted. Other cities and towns have specific things that are not permitted, and those are listed separately. But they also have the catchphrase that if it's not listed, it's not allowed. The problem here is that with horse racing, in prior proposals, let's say in Hardwick and Gardner, the argument there was that horse racing was agriculture, and that they didn't need any special zoning because it was agriculture, because it was horses, that, and breeding horses is agriculture. There's really no basis in fact for that, but it's just a hard argument. Here in Leominster, for the proposal that's in front of you now for the overlay district, that proposal would require that you consider horse racing to be recreation. And I think that if the Patriots came and built a stadium on your landfill and wouldn't allow anyone to play on the field, but they could use the bleachers or whatever else, you wouldn't consider that recreation. I mean, that's a professional commercial endeavor, the same as commercial horse racing. So I think it's because of the problems with the definitions and the uses of that definition in the industry in Massachusetts that it seemed appropriate to do it as a prohibition.
So,
Did that answer? I'm sorry.
no,
went a little
it does to a
off.
certain extent. So,
Okay.
so your petition is essentially saying, although we recognize that it's not accepted because it's not listed on the list of accepted uses,
Right.
this proposal wants it to specifically be put down as not accepted.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
You all set?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any, I'm going to go to the council now, the other councils. Are there any other councils that have questions about petition 4125? Council Robbins.
Lisa or Barbara, talk to me a little bit about why we as a city would want to blanket ban anything. This is an industry that, we've heard from the opponents of this project that, is on the decline, but why would we want to blanket ban anything that may provide some economic benefit at any point?
I think that goes back to the question when I was talking about morals and ethics and where we're getting our money from. Leominster is a very fortunate position to not necessarily have to do things. We are in a decent financial position, and we have the monies to do things like fund schools. We, granted, people might not want to pay for them, but that's just the cost of, being a city the size that we are and having the community that we have. The community that we have is also based on, family-friendly kind of activities, and we've heard that time and time again from multiple people. So I think, blanket banning is really just to try to keep it from anywhere within the city. It doesn't seem like, if people said, hey, if it wasn't a landfill, would you agree with it? No, it really goes back to, it's still horse racing. And when we say, oh, it's only 6 days of racing, guess what? It's still going to be simulcasting racing. It's like buying a puppy from Puppy Mill. You're still supporting it. So if we have some place that's simulcasting racing day in, day out, we're supporting those numbers that I talked about earlier, day in and day out. So it just makes sense to kind of, and take care of it once.
Okay. My other question is, you provided some references of other communities that have implemented bans on horse racing. Can you just, for the public and for the record, remind us who those communities are and kind of how they were able to successfully do that?
Well, off the top of my head, I know the town of Uxbridge and the town of Mendon, in their zoning regulations, prohibit dog tracks and horse tracks, where gambling goes on at that location. And that's really that sort of definition, which is the same that's in this petition, is to be certain that it's commercial horse and dog racing, because you have other horse and dog trials or whatever that are races. I don't know.
They're race
Yeah.
oriented, like if the
Yeah.
AKC has an event with dogs and they do like a dog rally or relay, it wouldn't affect anything like that. This is specifically commercial
Right.
for betting purposes.
Right, or eventing with horses where they're racing for time, but there's no gambling involved. It's interesting to note that with towns, the zoning ordinances are voted on at town meeting rather, you do it with the city council. It's the same 2/3 vote for the town meeting members, but the difference is with the town, that ordinance goes to the Attorney General's office, and they approve whether or not it's a legal ordinance or bylaw. Otherwise, it can't be implemented. So the fact that different towns have banned horse racing in their zoning in the entire town, and shows that the Attorney General's office approved that as a legal prohibition.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
So have any of the towns that have banned it, town or citywide, have they been challenged at all? Are you aware of any challenges to that?
No.
Okay.
No, and I'm not sure I don't know how you could challenge it since you cannot have commercial horse racing without approval of the local government. So if a city or a town didn't want horse racing, they're not going to have it. So the prohibition is, it's just helpful, then people aren't wasting their time looking to go there to implement, to attempt to do horse racing when they already know the community is against it.
Similar to a dry town.
Keep talking to, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, similar to a dry town.
Right, okay. Right. Councilor Arndinger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When you were talking about the effects of the horse racing, you mentioned simulcast betting. Is that part of your concern, is the betting? Because it seems like, we already have DraftKings and FanDuels and all kinds of, gambling available to people, so.
Right. So you have DraftKings in on all sorts of situations. You can bet on who's going to sing the longest at whatever, right?
Agreed.
Exactly. So this is specific to horse and dog racing and any betting and wagering on them. And the reason with, again, being against horse racing is for what I was saying, my comment was if we had some place that was doing horse racing and they're saying it's only going to be 6 race days a year, then it's still not just 6 race days. It's they're simulcasting
Comes
as
back to my
well.
question, you're really concerned about the other 300 and some odd days that there would be betting at the sports bar.
Right, not everybody, but that is, part of it, because if they're going to be, they're just saying, oh, it's only 6 days, but when you're simulcasting racing every single day, it's still supporting those numbers.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Can I just, sure. Can I answer? Yeah, I just want to point out that the people who signed the petition for the zoning change came at it from different approaches. Some of them, like Lisa, opposed to the simulcasting at all, but that's not what this doesn't do anything about simulcasting. The town of Great Barrington that used to have horse racing, there's no simulcasting allowed in the town, which is why why the horse racing died years ago, because they aren't allowed to do simulcasting there. That's not what this is. This is that there's no horse racing at all, but it doesn't keep people from betting on horse racing on their phone through DraftKings or anything else.
I don't see how that'll add to that problem then. Because they already have it. They have it
Oh.
at the tips of their fingers.
Sure, I think her point is that if you're allowing that industry here, you're contributing to that industry across the country. That's all. But that's, I mean, that's one of the arguments, and a lot of people believe that. The same people who voted in droves to ban dog racing, who thought it was cruel, and they didn't want it, and they didn't want betting on dog racing, though
Okay.
that took a number of years for the legislature to finally ban that.
Okay, thank you. I also have some concerns because I'm going to say both the opponents and the proponents have sources of outside funding. This is not a typical grassroots, and I'm just wondering where the funding for your petition comes from.
No, this is straight up. If there's funding, I would like to know where that's coming from, because we have no funding. This is just people like myself putting in like $20 to print it off on my own paper, and people offering to make T-shirts at cost. This is when you talk about grassroots still has people coming together to make it happen. Part of the problem is we are kind of in a little bit of a Davy and Goliath situation where we don't have the money. You don't see marketing coming from us to your home on a weekly or daily basis.
No one's being paid.
Yeah, there's nobody on we don't have lobbyists. We don't have anybody who's on the payroll. This is all completely a grassroots effort.
Well, I asked that question because you submitted a petition with some 1,100 signatures on it.
Okay.
Of those signatures, 24% of them were Leominster residents, and only 24%.
Okay, but that's a change.org. So the petition that was submitted with this, the actual petition, had 243 registered Leominster voters, which we obtained those signatures in 8 hours.
Okay.
And you guys know what it's like to go out and get signatures. So getting that many in 8 hours is a feat. And then the other ones were they're from a change.org petition. They were not submitted formally. They were there just to say, hey, this is what people support. The thing is with horse racing, again, this is a dying industry. It's happening across the country. This is not something that's just a Leominster topic. So you're going to find people from outside the area that are worried about this. We are the 9th community that is actually being proposed to have something here. The others have all basically turned it down. Each step of the way, there are people that are actually joining this. It's like a snowball rolling down a mountain, and it's just picking up speed, and it's picking up more people that are trying to get this stopped at the state level, because nobody wants to be playing whack-a-mole again and again and again, trying to get this stopped, right? So when you look at like those other signatures, it's just showing you. I actually haven't checked that. It's more for a platform to try to keep people informed, because we don't have the funds to send materials out. It's literally an effort through Facebook and that petition where I say, hey, there's going to be a meeting. So all these people that you see at the public hearings, and people can speak at public forums, that's literally just people being civically responsible, showing up again and again and again. So I'm hoping it doesn't come off as that there's somebody paying people, because we don't have anybody that's paid to do anything or be here. We're not paying. We didn't pay for those signatures. We didn't pay anybody to stand out. Matter of fact, I stood out for 4 hours by myself on Saturday, and then I had several other of the people that are here tonight with me on Sunday. Pauline Cormier actually saw us, and she saw people basically just walking over to the table, grabbing the pen. We had a big sign very clearly said Leominster registered voters, and exactly what it was.
Okay.
We were very, very specific, because we wanted to make sure that those signatures could be ratified.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You all set, Frank?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Is there anybody else who has any questions? Councilor Noseworthy.
Thank you. Most of my questions were actually already answered. I guess my question would be, and I'm going to ask each of the petitioners this question, to your point, there's a lot of information flowing, and people at home listening and trying to make decisions and figure things out, or trying to figure out what's real and what isn't real. So one of the questions I'm actually going to ask of both the petitioners is there anything that you're sort of seeing, because as you said, you don't have funds when you're collecting signatures and doing all the things or sending out mailings. Is there anything in the work that you're doing in your petition that you're seeing misinformation about that you would like to take any moment at all to either clarify or sort of say is true or untrue? So I just wanted to kind of give you that moment, because people at home, it's hard. You see things on social media. Is it real? Is it not real? So I just wanted to give you that opportunity.
I so appreciate that. There's a lot of information that and I think a lot of it has to do with perspective, right? Some people are very focused on the money, and that's kind of all that matters, because of course money makes the world go round. So we can appreciate that. But when you take a look at the HCA that's currently drafted, what we've been able to see, there's so many parts of it that actually indicate that the money is just tied to the horse race track. And as we've said before, it's on the decline. So if, there's that, and also the site that has been chosen is a toxic landfill. You guys have all been in Leominster for a really good long while and are well aware that we were the plastics capital of the world for a really long time. And it's filled with trichloroethylene and forever chemicals and highly toxic carcinogens, and and this is not really a focus other than, we'll do whatever the DEP tells us to do. But unfortunately, DEP can't weigh in until there's an application that's been submitted. So you guys, I don't envy you. You guys are going to have a tough decision to make. You guys are going to have to make decisions without having a good chunk of the information that really this should be based on. So, I could go on and on. Like the jobs, there's a disparity with what, sometimes is being said in the marketing versus what's in their own economic impact study. If anybody's at home is listening, I would actually tell them to go look at the economic impact study and look at the HCA. Like, look at their own materials. I don't need to speak to them. I think they should stand for themselves. But thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
You all set?
Yes.
Okay. One more time. Council Bedanza.
This is for Ms. Kellogg. There's an interesting juxtaposition between these two petitions. So I guess I follow your argument relative to why we need to prohibit something that's already prohibited. I'm not sure that I necessarily buy that an agricultural exemption is a real argument for this activity. But you would agree that even if we do prohibit horse and dog racing commercially in this community, it doesn't prohibit someone from a month from now or 6 years from now from coming back with a petition that's similar to 47-25 and changing the zoning, correct?
Correct. Correct, but
So where I'm going with this is that, do the opponents of horse and dog racing view the denial of both, which is a possibility? Obviously, there's a long way to go here before we get to a vote. But if both of these petitions were denied, does that put the opponents to horse and dog racing in Leominster in any different position than they'd want to be when all is over?
partly, and only the fact that if you pass the prohibition of horse and dog racing, then to change that is a 2/3 vote. So a future council wanting to allow dog or horse racing in the future would need a 2/3 vote to change that. Whereas just to approve a specific location for horse racing, that's just a simple majority.
But wouldn't you agree that based on the current state of zoning, to permit horse or dog racing commercially in Leominster, you'd need a 2/3 vote as well?
I would say that, but I believe that you would be in litigation for that because the argument of the people coming forward, Bay State Racing, with this, their argument is that it's agricultural and clearly for this, because the landfill can only be used for active or passive recreation, they're claiming it's
So
recreation.
what you're saying in essence is the only reason they haven't sued us already is because we haven't passed on their petition.
Correct.
So what you're saying is in essence that even if we deny their petition, that we're open to litigation because you believe that they have an argument for an agricultural exemption despite what the zoning says.
No, well, not for, if you pass the overlay, then you're saying that horse racing is allowed in that district. And then that gives them a leg up to their, whatever their argument is, the recreational on the landfill. If you deny the overlay, then they can't argue about horse racing.
That's my point,
that.
is that I don't believe, if both petitions were, and I don't know what's going to happen here,
Right.
obviously, but I don't know how they have an argument for their activity, even if we deny 41-25, as long as we deny 47-25 as well.
Right. If you deny 47-25, then, it's not only that, the landfill is owned by the city. So they can't race there without you taking more actions. And unless you're going to sell them the landfill property, it's illegal under state law for them to race there in any case.
All right, well.
But I don't know, it's convoluted, but they've made a lot of convoluted arguments in other towns.
I mean, from my perspective, there's a lot of things that have to be done to permit that activity on that site.
Absolutely.
And it seems to me, would you agree that it makes sense to start with the zoning? Because if that doesn't work, then none of the rest is even, it's all moot after that, I would think, correct?
I would think so.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You all set?
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other councilors that have any questions? No? Okay. Anything else that you'd like to say about the petition, or any last point that you would like to make?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for all your time. Like, you guys have had to put a lot of effort into this already. There's been a lot of people, and I'm sure the next couple of weeks you're going to have a lot more to deal with, contend with, hear from. And thank you all for that, and best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, next up, petition 47-25, Brian R. Falk, attorney, on behalf of Crossroads Office Park LLC, request to adopt the proposed Fairgrounds Overlay District zoning requirements. That's probably good. Yeah.
We have some printouts, if that's helpful.
Sorry?
We have printouts of that, if that's
Great.
helpful.
Thank you.
Good.
Right. So before we begin, it would be helpful to have everybody introduce themselves and I guess tell us what your relationship, what your job is, I guess, on the project would be helpful.
Yeah, Madam Chair, and maybe I can help a little bit on that. So Tom, for the record, Tom Bavenzi, here for the petitioner Crossroads Office Park LLC, whose principal manager is Peter Zacchelli, and he's here tonight also. With me tonight is Jim Whitney, and he's a managing member of Bay State Racing LLC. Brittany Gesner, and she's a professional engineer with VHB. Catherine Kuzma, she's a licensed site professional with VHB on 21 site investigations. I have Martin Suberg. He's managing partner with Durandon Onassis Environmental Consultants. I have Jennifer Flanagan Long, who's a consultant for Bay State on this matter. and then Paul Umbrello, who's the executive director of the New England Horsemen's Benevolent Protection Association, is also here with me tonight. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Brittany. I think she's going to handle the lion's share of the technical aspects.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I'm going to introduce the project on a whole, our concept. It's shown here on the board. I do have handouts if that's helpful, if you want to close up view. I will just keep one for myself. There should be 9 there. So as was mentioned, my name is Brittany Gessner. I'm a civil engineer with VHB. What I specialize in is design and permitting of large-scale, complicated land development projects. So projects like this that require a lot of local permitting, a lot of state permitting, a lot of federal permitting, several years of permitting. They involve lots of different consultants, site engineers, landscape architects, traffic engineers, geotechnical engineers, licensed site professionals. Those are the types of projects that I have well over a decade of experience designing and permitting across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in probably over dozens of communities. So this project here, as you can see, we're proposing, this is a very simple concept plan of a project that we're proposing on 2 separate parcels of land that total approximately 42 acres. One parcel is an approximately 30-acre landfill owned by the city of Leominster. And the other parcel is an approximately 12-acre parcel of land, which is known as the Crossroads Office Park. On the figure in front of you, all of that land is outlined in the dark blue line. And then there's a lighter blue line that goes through nearly the center. On the left side of that light blue line is the landfill, and on the right side of that is the Crossroads Office Park. There are lots of different components to this project, but what you'll notice is that all of our permanent structures and buildings are proposed on the right-hand side of that light blue line. So we are not proposing any permanent structures on top of the landfill. The components of the project that we're proposing, you can see on the north of the site, we have the Leominster Connector. On the south of the site, we have Mechanic Street. Both the Crossroads Office Park and the landfill are accessed today using curb cuts off of Mechanic Street. What we would like to do as part of this project is add a 4th leg to that existing signal that extends to Nashua Street, and add a 4th leg that's shown in yellow, which will provide vehicular access up onto the landfill into the Crossroads Office Park. Then the other components of the project do include a 1-mile horse racing track that will be predominantly located on the landfill. We would like to convert one of the existing office buildings into a sports bar, and that is off of the landfill. We would like to maintain one of the office buildings, and then we would like to add a 120-unit residential building, which already has local approvals dating back to a prior proposal. We would propose to close off the curb cuts from Mechanic Street onto both of the parcels. We would likely keep a curb cut for emergency access only, but that would be up to discussions between us and the city. We are proposing approximately 250 parking spaces for daily use on the Crossroads Office Park side of the property, and then approximately 650 parking spaces on top of the landfill. As I'll get to in a moment, we will likely need additional parking spaces for the event day use. Those would likely be off-site, and we would truck people in. So there's 2 scenarios we're proposing on this project. There would be a daily use where folks could come and use the restaurant, they could come and use the office park, or they could come and use the residential buildings, and that would all be accessed off of Leominster Connector. That would be the majority of the year. The other part of the project is to propose large-scale events, approximately 2,000 to 5,000 attendees, for race day weekends. So those are approximately proposed for 2 weekends a year, 3 days on those weekends, and those are what we would call event days. The rest of the year, this property may be used for smaller events. We could set up a system with the city that we could work through approvals of what those smaller events look like. I would like to note that we will be proposing work on top of the landfill. We will need to cut into the cap. We will need to modify the cap. We will need to modify the existing gas collection system. We will not be removing any material from the site. If anything, we will be relocating it and adding on to it. In a moment, my colleague will speak more to what that process looks like. As has been mentioned at length prior to us coming up here, we are very early on in the project. This is a concept, and we have many steps to go. As is often the case in development projects, you want to deal with the high-risk components of a project, and then you step down to the low risk. So when we talk about local permitting, the highest risk, the most subjective application we have on this project is with you guys with City Council. So we would like to understand that. We would like to get past that risk, and then we can start spending more money and spending more time and doing lots of detailed analyses to take care of the next steps in the process. From a local perspective, we do expect to have to be in front of City Council, Planning Board, Conservation Commission, and Board of Health. And in that order, those are sort of the descending order of high risk to low risk applications. We also have a number of review processes with the state. We will need to go in front of the Gaming Commission. We need to go in front of the Office of Energy Environmental Affairs. That would be for what's called a MEPA review. That is a 1-year-long process. And the purpose of that is to solicit public input. So that is typically a 3-step process over the course of a year where we will be engaging with the public. We will start with a concept, we will put it out to the public, we will get public feedback, we will work it in. And that is typically a year-long process. We must complete that MEPA review before we can receive any state permits. So there's a number of state permits we need. We need state permits from DOT, we need state permits from DEP. That permitting process will likely also take a year or more. We can't even do that process until we get through MEPA. So I just say all this because this is a standard typical development process, but it's going to take time. There's going to be lots of steps along the way for local and public input so that we can work together and hopefully provide Leominster with a well thought out plan. I'd like to elaborate on the Mass DOT process a little bit. The Leominster connector is under Mass DOT ownership, and so we will have to work very closely with Mass DOT and the city throughout the design and planning of this project. We will require an access permit from them, and they will require a number of detailed studies, both during the MEPA review process and then their follow-on access permit process. As far as the event day management, we will need to prepare an event day management plan with them, and that is a collaborative process that will go with DOT and with input from the city. I think it's important to mention all that goes into that event day management plan, that we work with local stakeholders, we'll work with city police, state police, DOT, as well as other representatives of the city. But that event day management plan will clearly detail what the staging in the roadway will entail during event day management plan, event timing, parking management, identification of neighborhood parking restrictions, temporary intersection control, shuttle bus routes, signage and wayfinding, media and digital content outreach, and identification of police and medical emergency access and egress. The interesting thing about an event day management plan is that is a fluid plan. So we would work together to put it together. You'd go through year 1, see how that goes, and then we may change it for year 2 based on input from the city or the state. There are lots of other steps we'll be going through with DOT, but I know that the event day has caused some people some heartburn, so I did want to dive into that. I'll pass it off to my colleague who will discuss the DEP permitting process. And
hopefully this one's on. My name is Katie Kudzma again. I'm a licensed site professional. For anyone that, for everyone's benefit, I guess, a licensed site professional, we are licensed by the state to render opinions regarding site assessment and cleanup. So my background, I work on contaminated sites throughout the Commonwealth. I have degrees in environmental geoscience, sustainability, and environmental management. So as part of this project, as Brittany mentioned, we have a very lengthy permitting process ahead. Likely the first step, which would be similar to other development projects, is a geotechnical evaluation. So we would actually need a Mass DEP permit to even perform geotechnical borings within the landfill, and that would be to assess potential for settlement, differential settlement, things like that. Then the next permit we would need is a SW36 permit from Mass DEP Solid Waste. That's a post-closure use major category permit. And that permit really summarizes, like everything what Brittany said, it has all the studies and things that would be needed to show Mass DEP that this would be a safe use. So that includes plans, the design plans. We need to include very detailed plans regarding any areas of cap penetration, and then what the repairs would be for the cap, and any kind of gas collection system modifications, and any kind of stormwater design, and the slopes and grading. And then we would look at geotechnical settlement and stability analysis is required as part of that permit. We have to explain the environmental monitoring measures that safeguard against gas accumulation. That also includes a qualitative health and environmental risk assessment, and post-closure maintenance and monitoring plan, financial assurance mechanism stating that the owner of the site needs to be able to maintain that monitoring as long as Mass DEP requires the monitoring be performed. And then there's also possibility that Mass DEP could include another a public comment period as well along with that permit. And then during construction, so construction is something that's done very particularly within landfills, as you could imagine. You'd need OSHA 40-hour trained HAZWOPER workers, so everyone's aware of the potential risks going into it, and they can take wear appropriate personal protective equipment. They would be carefully exposing the areas of the cap that need to be worked on. And during that, we would have engineers, scientists out there with real-time air and gas monitoring and dust monitoring as required as part of the environmental monitoring program. Dust odor suppression as necessary if any of those things are observed, and then we'd be documenting via field reports and verifying all of the cap repairs as well. And at the end of that entire process, the engineer needs to certify that the work was performed in accordance with the permit, and they need to stamp that, send it to DEP, and then receive and submit a closure completion report. So that's sort of the start to finish on how Mass DEP Solid Waste would be involved and how we'd be involved helping make sure that the landfill and the repairs and the future development is protective of human health and the environment.
Excuse me. Katie, do you work for VHB as well? You do, okay.
No, I think, Katie's covered it well. The points that are really being underscored are first, the MEPA review, as Brittany indicated, invites a lot of comment, including comment from the agencies like DEP and others to preview the types of things they'll be looking for. Then when you're in the permitting process, the goal is to make sure that the activity that is being applied for, the applicant can demonstrate that it can be done safely, that it can be done with full regard to the fact that it is on a former landfill site. As has probably been discussed before, we know there are other landfills around the Commonwealth, around the Northeast, that have been redeveloped for other purposes, institutional uses, shopping centers, sports fields, parks. So there is experience out there. Certainly VHB has a good amount of experience in this area. But there will be a lot of detailed technical work by engineers, by scientists to make sure that the process looks at all of the issues, and DEP would have to review it and agree that all of those issues are properly addressed.
Mike, can you give them your background?
Yeah, I'm with Durandon and Assis right now. We're an environmental consulting firm, but before that, I was with DEP for 22 years, 8 years as commissioner. You know, again, I come to this with the perspective that we've seen other types of projects. I know they're planning a rigorous review for this one, and DEP will expect a rigorous review.
Paul, you want to from the horse perspective?
Do you want me to give updates, or do you want to wait for questions?
So,
Because I have a list to respond to, that I can either wait for questions, or I'll wait till the end and give you my feedback.
You can give it now.
You ready for now?
Yep.
All right. Thank you. I don't need a microphone. I'm Italian, I talk loud. Okay, a couple of things to clear the air, and it's a lot of data, and I'll try to be, I talk fast at times, but articulate it the best I can.
Could you just give us, I'm sorry, could you just give us your name again and the organization?
Sorry, I did earlier. So I'm
Thank
Paul
you.
Obrello. I'm the executive director for the New England Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association. We are actually the oldest horsemen's organization in the country. And I also serve as a director on the Mass Thoroughbred Breeders Board. So a couple things I just want to clear the air with. I think it was mentioned about 65,000 horses being slaughtered. I'd like to kind of question where that number comes from, because I can assure you those 65,000 are not all thoroughbreds. Sadly, there's every equine breed that's included in that number. And why I also can refute or back those numbers up, which I happen to have tonight, is the Jockey Club, which when a foal is born today, we have 48 hours to register that foal. So the last 10 years of the Jockey Club, we only average about 20,000 foals a year. So 100,000 foals a year, and where they end up if they don't make racing, that number's not accurate. And I can supply that to you, or you can go right to the Jockey Club's website and find that information. So if you go 10 years, 200,000 foals being born, and yes, some don't make it to the races, but it's impossible 65,000 of those horses went to slaughter and just be thoroughbreds. And why it's even more important from the thoroughbred world, and I wish, and I advocate for the utmost care for thoroughbred horses, and we are the most federally and state regulated industry in the country, is we now have to microchip our horses. So any horse that's microchipped and ends at a facility, they have to scan that horse, and we are notified. There's no way in heck today, and that's what we're doing. And statistically, as Ms. Nugent appropriately said, Q1, we're actually down to 0.71 from 0.90. So the chart shows you, we understand the industry. We're doing everything we can to make it better and safer. And again, as we're regulated, I think it's important for the audience, you folks, because I know you have a tough decision to make, what's right for the city, what's right for your constituents. But I think it's important to really understand the true data, the true metrics, and what goes on behind the scenes. A lot to take in, sorry, so I'm trying to get all my thoughts. So 65,000 to slaughter, impossible. In fact, we were the first, with Suffolk Downs when we raced, the first group to implement an anti-slaughter rule. So we can have rules and regs at this level, HISA can come in at this level, but we in Massachusetts as horsemen and taking our industry serious, we brought the bar this level. So if your horse, at the time, which wasn't microchipped, we found out ended in the wrong hands, you were banned from racing at the track ever. If you were caught as a trainer with an illegal substance back then, which again, state to state is not regulated as it is today, you were also banned from racing at Suffolk Downs. And I can assure you today, we the horsemen, when we race 6 days of festivals, we can then take, when you want to enter a horse in a race, we can review the owner, the trainer, and that horse, and we refuse entries. So if there's a bad character out there, we don't have to accept bad characters coming into race. We have that control. That's why we're separated from the investors. The other thing I think it's important to understand, you have now a private vet and 3 state vets at the track. A horse will go through a morning inspection by one state vet. They'll go through that vet. If your private vet does anything to touch that horse or administer anything, he has to, in 24 hours, report that into a HISA database. So now the history of a horse's activities, his treatment is all being captured and recorded, right? So then you also have, and I'll try to slow down, but it's a lot of information, and it's what our industry is like. You then have a vet that will follow the horses up to the paddock when they get race ready. That vet will also monitor and watch those horses. If that vet, from their experience, sees anything that doesn't look right, they have the right to scratch that horse, and your owner and the trainer has no say. You'll then also find a vet that stands on the rail of the racetrack, the finish line. And then you'll have the third vet that will follow the horses to the gate as they're being entered to race. That vet also can monitor a horse if he's acting up, doesn't look right, might be off, has the authority to scratch that horse then. And you'll see more and more tracks across the country, you're seeing just that, right? So we continue to move in the right direction. We're not going this way, we're going this way. And then when the race goes off and the horses come back, the vet that's on the rail can also watch how that horse gallops out. And they then, if they don't see something they like, they can flag that horse. They will notify the other vet. The horse will go back to the barn, and then that horse can also get on the vet list. When you get on the vet list with HISA today, it is more and more challenging to get off that list. You have to prove workouts, and you have to be inspected by the vet yet again. A couple of pieces you must understand and know. Today, which actually an article just came out, but we've already been working behind the scenes that we are now using biometric sensors on the horses. It's a monitor that's the horse wears, and when the horse works out and trains, even the 2-year-olds and races, that biometric sensor captures data and sends a report to the trainer the next day. And it's almost like when you go to the doctors and you do a blood test and you get a baseline, and then all of a sudden you might go back and let's pick something, your cholesterol might go up. The doctor then might say, hey, let's run more tests, let's put you on a heart monitor, let's go do a CAT scan. Well, that technology now, and we're taking advantage of it, now alerts that trainer and even a vet that might not see something to the naked eye ahead of time that there could be something going on. So we're doing everything we can to make the industry safer for the horses and more humane. The other thing I think it's important to know, because I think I've seen it come up, and I do try to stay off social media because of a lot of one-sided or statistics that you can go to the Gaming Commission, you go to the Jockey Club, you can go to HISA, that's the data can't lie, is for anybody that covers a horse, from your owner, trainer, a groom, a valet, a lead-out pony, all the individuals that will have jobs at the track, you have to be licensed, fingerprinted, and background checked through the Gaming Commission and get approved. So no individual that might just come off the street, walk the grounds, can get licensed through the Gaming Commission. You should also understand that after each race, your stewards that also work for the state and license, they can, when a horse wins a race, a horse has a urine sample tested, and that goes off to an independent lab that HISA now controls. And your racing steward can also then randomly pick any horse out of that field to also go and have a urine test, which goes off to an independent lab to be tested. All right, so I talked about licenses, I talked about horse safety. Funding. So our organization has always been advocates to, and it's legislatively written, is that when we get back up to racing, the legislation takes a percentage of funding and we donate to Tufts Lodge Animal, well, we don't donate, it's appropriated to Tufts Lodge Animal Clinic. So that's again money that goes towards Tufts that we hope today, obviously, as we see with new ideas, new technologies, that we can use to make racing safer and the overall health and well-being of the horse safer. And then what you should also understand is that if a trainer is caught today with a violation, there's different classifications and levels. HISA can pose hefty fines from hundreds to thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the trainer can also be suspended for days, weeks, months, years, or even permanently. And again, while the bar might be here, we, the horsemen, can always then take, when we're running at the 6-day festivals, we can always increase that bar and choose, as I said. We can refuse, we can make the buy higher than wherever it's set. So I think it was important to understand that, because I understand and see some of that deviant out there about horses being slaughtered or not well being cared for. If you've ever been to the racetrack and see the passion that your owners and breeders and trainers put into the horse and the well-being, they go in exercise pools, they go in exercise riders, they go in equicizers. A lot goes into it, but the horse does come first. That help? I
Great.
hope?
Thank you.
All right, sorry.
So I think we're good for questions?
Okay, I would like to go to Mr., is it Umbrello?
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
there is no thoroughbred horse racing in Massachusetts, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so how much harness, I mean, it's nice to hear about all of these, these programs and safety things and all the licensing and all that kind of stuff, but there is no thoroughbred racing, and there are no licenses available on the Mass Gaming Commission's website, right?
Correct, so I'd like to, because the comment was made, our industry is far from dying. The point was,
Mhm.
unfortunately, is land, just like for our breeders, becomes more valuable for development. So obviously, part of our goal is not also preserving jobs, it's preserving open space in those breeding farms and the jobs associated with it, prevents your transportation, your hay and feed. So unfortunately, Suffolk Downs sitting on 150 acres beside the airport and 2 T stations is just more valuable for development. That's why we're here today, trying to look to revitalize and keep our industry going, and the health and welfare programs we support, the breeding programs we support. But again, the only industry, again, through equine, that is so heavily state regulated. No other, your show horses, jumpers, barrel racing, have no oversight, no control.
Okay. I do have a question.
I'll try to answer.
How, the site, how did you guys, I guess this is for Jim, and Mr. Fields or whoever is representing, you're representing Bay State, right, Jim?
Yes.
Okay. How did you settle on this site, the landfill site? I mean, there's the DEP restriction on how it can be used, passive and active recreation. It's unlawful to race horses on state-owned or publicly owned land, which the landfill currently is. So I think, and then the whole, mystery about trying to build a racetrack on top of a landfill, presents a whole other set of challenges. So I'm just wondering, like, how did that become the site to propose? It just seems like it's it has more than your average set of challenges, I think.
Location, pretty much the location attracted me.
Look,
Thought it, yeah. Thought it was a great spot on the intersection of 190 and Route 2. And if it was big enough, I didn't even know if it was big enough to do it. We had to do a conceptual drawing to see if that would even work.
And in terms of the legal impediments, how are you going to address those?
That's for the lawyers, one step at a time.
Okay. All right, I have a few other questions, but I guess I'll go to my committee, and I'll go to Councilor Tossi first.
Thank you, Sue. This question is for Katie, the LSP. In terms of that landfill, what's would you say, the degree of difficulty on cleaning or leveling this thing out and making it usable for a horse track?
Sure. I think that that's dependent on the final design, of course, and how intrusive that would be. So how much of the cap requires upgrading and the systems require.
Whoa.
Whoops. I think we're
We
fixing
got
it.
electrocuted out there.
But it is, as Marty mentioned, though, this is not a completely unusual project. There are many other landfills that have been permitted for post-closure uses. So hundreds of solar facilities. There are entire shopping plazas that are on landfills, so it's definitely not unheard of.
Now, I looked at the data, it said there's about 390 of these things in Massachusetts, I think, of these landfills, and only 20% have been built upon. Why would that be?
You think about the landfills and the size of them. Some of them are very small, and if you're talking about, a couple acre landfill, then even solar isn't really financially viable. So I think it's really about the location of the landfills themselves, the size. There's some, potential grading components or maybe proximity to other resources or I'm sure there's numerous reasons.
Okay, and final question, what could go wrong if we start moving around this stuff? I mean, is there must be consequences of some degree if things leach or I'm not sure.
The landfill itself has been closed since 1996.
Does the DEP monitor it right now?
Yes, so
For 30 years?
30 years is the minimum post-closure monitoring period. The DEP can extend that. It's monitored quarterly. Woodard and Curran is the consultant that's been engaged by the city to do that work. There is nothing unusual about any of the monitoring that Woodard and Curran has found compared to other landfills in the state. In terms of things going wrong, that's the purpose of all the environmental monitoring plans that would be in place as part of construction. You're using a contractor that clearly understands what they're doing. You're doing all the right things to prevent anything like that from happening. So.
Is the data on that landfill public information?
It is, yes. So there is sources of information with Mass DEP, Solid Waste Department, and then the Health Department holds all of the monitoring reports, is my understanding.
But you would consider this a difficult project?
Not necessarily. I think that, I think if you have the financial means to do a project like this, then more power to you. So I think that's
Okay, thank you.
It's just a project.
Yes, sir. Council Pauline Cormier.
Katie, just to expand on that a little, so what would be can you give us an example of what would be the go, no-go spot? If you get in there, you do your testing, what's going to be the okay, stop, this is going to be a no-go? Where do we get to that point? Give me an example of what that would be.
Sure. There are probably multiple points where that can happen. It's going to mostly be during the DEP permitting process. So, like I said, geotechnical studies need to be done. If the geotech comes back and says, this isn't happening, then we'd probably be stuck there. If any of the studies that we do as part of the Mass DEP permitting come back unreasonable, then obviously it's another piece to consider. And then Mass DEP themselves can certainly review the permit and come up with critiques and things they'd like to see change, or they could outright reject the permit. So.
Okay. So my question becomes, and you might not know the answer to this, so if you go in there and as part of getting ready for this process and you do some drilling, some holes, at that point it comes back and it looks bad. Who is then going to be responsible for, if you've now drilled holes, disturbed it, and found something that we didn't know was there, didn't know it existed? Whose responsibility does that now become? Does that fall back onto the city? Does that fall onto the developers who are now doing this testing, starting this process?
I'll let Marty answer.
Okay.
I'm afraid to touch this.
Sorry for the musical chairs, and I promise not to touch the wire. Well, the idea when Katie's talking about the testing, this is a closed landfill, and it was closed and approved by DEP in the mid-90s. So what they're doing is to look and make sure that, really the question is, will the disturbance cause an issue? As opposed to, we're going to find something that we aren't really expecting to find. There's been years of monitoring data in terms of gas, in terms of groundwater. I think the purpose, and correct me if I'm wrong, Katie, is just to make sure that we can be confident that this project and the improvements that will be put on top of the landfill will work. And so, you're looking at things to make sure you've got stable soils. You know where the waste pockets are. You know what kind of things you're going to need to do with the cap. You know how much soil you might need to even out the surface of the area. Those are the kinds of things that the testing helps determine.
So again, my question is what if this testing begins and you find something that's disturbing that says, well, this would be the no-go for us, or this would be financially it would be too much for us to go forward. At that point, when you've done that and you've discovered this, who is then responsible for it? Does that fall back onto the city, or does that fall onto the
Yep. Again, I think what you would be doing is if you found a problem, you would be closing it back up and making sure that the cap is functioning and the other provisions are put there. I mean, we know it's a landfill. We know there are things in there. The idea is to do no harm. And so to make sure, that's taken care of, people will go in and take a look, and then if they find something, and again, there's a lot of experience in terms of being able to design things. The shopping center, the UMass facilities in South Boston, the parks. People encounter a lot of things. There are landfills across the Commonwealth, really across the Northeast, that have been redeveloped. So, I would say that, first of all, I think there's a degree of optimism that people aren't going to encounter that. But if there is, there will be a plan in place to make sure that, you're not breaching the integrity of the landfill that was closed in accordance with DEP rules 30 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, are you alluding to maybe that it would turn into like a brownfields site? Like you're going to drill something down there and all of a sudden, now you're going to, like when we run into stuff when we're redoing mills or something like that, you've got to remove the soil and someone's got to pay to remove the soil.
Correct.
That's what she's talking about.
So if something gets disturbed, we're doing this testing, we're checking everything, and something gets disturbed. Oh no, look what we found, there's something leaching into the Nashua River. Now, okay, so that's the point that we're going to stop. I want to know whose responsibility that then becomes. Does that get put back onto the city? Is there a bond? Is there insurance? Is there something in place?
Yeah, so maybe I could address that, from a legal perspective. So there is a bond, there is a surety, so the obligation, and it's like any other contracting entity with a municipality or a state entity, they take on the full responsibility and the obligation, and that is backed by a surety or a bond. So to the extent there was any disturbance of the property, that would be on the contractor to remediate and take care of. To the extent, and that's bonded, so there's cash behind that or surety. To the extent that the project didn't go forward in the unlikely event because of some environmental restraint or condition, that would never fall on the city. That would still be the contractor to restore it to its original condition. And this is typical in all kinds of construction projects where the entity entering upon the property, the contractor in this case of the owner of the property, the city, enters into a contract, and that's covered, that they are fully responsible for anything that they do to that property, and they have money behind it, not just themselves, although in this case they would have the ability to do it financially. So there would be a surety, there would be a bond.
Okay, so there would be some insurance so that as soon as any testing, anything steps on that property, that it's covered. Yes. And it's not going to fall back on the city and its citizens.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
I'm going to go to Council Bonanza.
So I want to refine a couple of these ideas. So what you're saying collectively, I guess, is that this geotechnical drilling, the whole idea of it is to find out what's down there, right? I mean, for the purposes of redeveloping this property, at least. Is that correct?
Primarily to assess the structural, stability and the density.
Yeah, because you don't know what's under the ground. No one really does, do they?
So there are numerous environmental assessments that have been performed of the landfill in order to close it.
And you're suggesting to me, I guess, Councilor Bovenzi, that there's going to be a bond in place to cover any costs associated with disruption or damage as a result of the geotechnical investigation?
Right, so if there was if all the testing was done and it's done at the contractor's expense and it was moving forward, then obviously the city wouldn't incur any liability in that sense. In the event they'd have to restore the property, in the event they weren't going to go forward. I thought that was one of the questions.
Well, that's before the three-pronged DEP analysis, right? Part of which is financial assurance, right? That's long before you get there, correct?
So the geotechnical, you need a a specific permit to make any kind of penetration into the cap. So
That's not my question.
Okay.
My question was, that's before the three-pronged DEP analysis relative to the development or redevelopment of that property, correct?
the financial assurance
Yes.
piece. I mean, before that permit comes into play, yes, but the individual.
So how are we going to know what the proper amount of this bond is? Who's going to assess that?
So that's under the Mass DEP regulations, under 310 CMR 19, I believe.
You're telling me that there's a CMR that tells us how much the bond should be
It's about
for a
the-
geotechnical
this-
investigation?
Specific Mass DEP requirements for financial assurance mechanisms are in the regulations, yes.
That's not the question. The question, again, is you're telling me that the CMRs provide for a specific amount for a bond to do a geotechnical analysis and before this three-pronged DEP analysis.
No, so the,
So as a general proposition, the city is going to hire consultants representing the city's interests. Those would be paid for, like any peer review, by the contractor.
So now you're telling me the city's doing this geotechnical analysis?
So the city owner of the land is going to have a contract with the contractor. Part of that contract, as far as an agreement, would provide for assurances bonding for an amount. The establishment of that amount would be determined by the experts of the cities as well as the experts from the contractor, as is done in every construction project. I mean, you can have a viewpoint of an estimate. You have a consultant come in, they estimate this is what it would be, and that's subject to agreement review, and ultimately the city would be protected. You'd have your own consultants.
There's multiple financial assurances that could be relied on. I know that I think there was an insurance policy at one point at least discussed, a bond, and a letter of credit.
Correct.
Any thought, Counselor, about a letter of credit? Because I've been involved with bonds and insurance companies. In fact, when I was city solicitor here, we had a bond written by a company chartered in the Bahamas, and we got some nice, pretty paper, with notes on pretty paper, but we didn't get any money.
No, that's a point well taken, and that absolutely, the level of the security, we're using a generalized term, would have to be satisfactory to the city, whether it be a letter of credit or some other form, not a artificial or something that is not accessible in the event it needs to be tapped.
Getting back to the, these geotechnical tests are on an unlined landfill, right?
the landfill's online, correct?
Right. And Councilor Tossi asked you a question that I don't think you answered, which is what could go wrong?
So it's specifically with the borings themselves.
The whole project.
It's like incredibly speculative to sort of state that.
Well, how many of these have you done?
Me personally, I mean, I work and monitor landfills.
No, how many have you personally observed or been in control of?
I've observed work on landfills about, a handful of times.
How many of these you quarterbacked?
Quarterbacked as in?
Then run.
So I'm not the professional engineer, unfortunately, so the professional engineer would be the one certifying the work.
Okay.
I don't have that license.
So, but I renew my question. What could go wrong?
I mean, so geotechnical boring involves drilling. I mean, one of the drill rig operators could potentially get hurt. Trying to think of so the point of the borings is they'd actually be replacing the material and they'd be plugging the hole that they're creating and they're repairing that at the surface, they're repairing the cap, and the professional engineer has to sign off on that cap repair.
Could a receptor be polluted?
I mean, based on the fact that the age of the landfill and how old it is and stable it is, with all of the data that's been collected over the last 20-plus years, it's unlikely that there be conditions that differ from what's already been documented.
Is it possible, apart from this project, one of the receptors for this has to be the Nashua River, correct?
receptors in what sense?
In terms of what is potentially, isn't that one of the first prongs that gets developed in this analysis by DEP, is to identify the receptors?
Yeah, there'd be nearby water bodies, and I think Conservation Commission as well would be involved.
Well, do you have any sense of what the receptors are at this point as you sit here?
So, I mean, the receptors in terms of there is groundwater data that's been collected that's protective of that groundwater does flow towards the Nashua River, and so that's monitored continually by Woodard and Curran.
Maybe Mr. Suberg would have a better answer for this one.
Well,
Can I?
yeah, by all means.
If you want to elaborate on that, I'll let you do that before I ask my question.
Yeah, I mean, the idea behind the post-closure use permit process is to take a look and make sure that something, bad isn't happening. So, yeah, I would anticipate that, as Catherine talked about earlier, there's going to be a lot of monitoring to think about what's going on around the edges. There's going to be groundwater monitoring. There's going to be silt fences and other things that, will need to be developed to protect it. I would say that, just having talked to the team here, people are keenly aware of the fact that this is near a water body and that we are going to have to make sure that the water body is protected both in the assessment period and in the construction period. So yes, I do believe that as part of the work that they're going to do, and the application process calls, if you look at the Form 36, it calls for a variety of things to be analyzed, and I would expect that there would be something there that would take a look at how do we make sure that nothing, either in the testing or in the construction phase, is negatively affecting the water body.
Things that I've read and researched have suggested to me that there is a possibility for an enhanced monitoring and collection of seepage from that landfill in respect to the Nashua River, regardless of this project. Does that sound like a possibility or a plausibility to you?
Well, that's one of the things that I think you could, that will be taken a look at both by the team and I suspect by DEP. And Jim has mentioned this, that an opportunity here with looking at this is the fact that you're getting a fresh look at all the protective measures that are in place. What should you be doing in 2025 versus what you might have been doing in 1997 or 2000? So yeah, there is an opportunity there that as people are looking at what's in the landfill and designing the project, that there will, and I would expect that would be part of the discussion with DEP. I can't speak for them, but how will we make sure that we're addressing the nearby water bodies?
One of my concerns, and I think Councilor Cormier alluded to it, is that there's sort of a cut and run here. So, a problem develops, maybe not as a result of this development, maybe not as a result of the fault of the development. I have a feeling that the private entity is not going to get involved in what we have to do to remediate that problem. And that's a real grave concern of mine. And to point out what could go wrong, some of the things I found were there was a redevelopment up in Canada, in Toronto, where they built a multi-story housing development. The first two floors were open-air parking, and the building literally sunk into the landfill. I'm gravely concerned about the possibilities here. I'm going to have to hear a lot. You got a couple weeks, I guess, or almost a couple weeks. On the 23rd, I'm going to need to hear a lot about how we're going to be protected once this landfill is even touched.
Could I offer?
Yeah, sure.
I would just like to say that as part of the DEP review process, we will need to complete settlement analyses. So that's why we want to explore and collect data to understand how much the existing material has settled and what compression is available. And then we would use that to design the proposed conditions. We would rely on an engineered grid that goes along the top of the grassed area to structurally support any activities that are happening on the landfill, and that would be designed based on the data that we're collecting. I would say a unique component of this proposal is we are not proposing any permanent structures on top of the landfill. Therefore, if there is settlement over time, it's grass. You know, we can.
Well,
we
you're,
have-
you're building on a sponge, right? That's what you're doing. I mean, in essence, let's cut to the chase. I mean, the landfill is a big sponge, right, with no liner at the bottom. So I understand why you're not putting any permanent structures on it because of the example I just cited in Canada. I mean, so my question again, and part of my concern is that you get down the road, either maybe in the analysis or the testing, and say, this isn't going to work, or worse, you get further down the road and you start building things and we find out it's not working. Now what?
Understood. And I understand your sponge analogy. I think the unique thing here is this landfill has been in place and closed for so long, so it's not a freshly wet sponge. There's a lot of settlement that's already occurred. We're basically at the end of the current monitoring period for that landfill.
Yeah, the fact that we're at the end of the current monitoring period doesn't tell us the structural capacity of that trash, junk, debris, whatever the heck it is on the. I mean,
I totally agree. That's why
a lot
we
of
want
us
to
as kids
explore
were
it.
down there. You know, we know some of the stuff that went in there. Believe me, and I wouldn't want to be working on it. Let's put it that way. So. None of us know what the structural capacity of that landfill is right now as we sit here, I don't think, unless somebody knows a lot more than I do.
Which is exactly why we want to collect that data to explore that.
Are you all set?
I am, thank you.
All right, I'm going to go to Councilor Noseworthy.
Thank you. I actually want to take it a step further and ask, as far as liability and things like that, and obviously what I'm about to propose is something I know that no one wants to happen, but as you know, we're all sitting up here and we have to make some really big decisions. Say things go well, say things move forward, say everybody's following federal, state, local regulations, and say there are issues that don't come out until later. You know, like, you know, people get cancer or things like that, and everyone's done everything correct. I want to follow the logical progression of, in that point, and we're talking at that point maybe 20 or 30 years, because we're sitting up here making a really big decision. What then? I understand that you're all going to follow federal, state, and local regulations, but at that point, taking things to a natural progression, you know, for me personally, sitting up here and making such a heavy decision, this is one of the largest things that kind of sets on me morally and ethically, and I just want to be clear about that.
You all set? I'm going to go to Councilor Robbins.
I'm going to take us in a totally different direction from the environmental impacts. I want to talk a little bit about the actual petition that was submitted. And it wasn't discussed as one of your plans tonight, but one of the by right uses is a hotel. I don't see it mentioned on the plan. I'm curious, you know, what the plan is, if there is a plan for a hotel at some point now or in the future. And then I'll drive into traffic after that.
That was pretty much the thought process, was maybe instead of building the apartments, to build a hotel instead.
Okay. Okay. And I guess my curiosity also leads to in the amended petition that we got from Attorney Falk, or the city clerk got from Attorney Falk a couple of weeks ago, every other by right use was listed except for that hotel. So that just brings me some concerns about transparency for the public. But on the topic of traffic, we've heard a lot about this. We've heard that even tonight that all of the entrance or all of the public access is going to be from the Leominster connector side. I'm curious if there's going to be walkable access from the Mechanic Street side, and if so, what's going to stop a GPS taking somebody down 495 to 117 over Viscaloid and into that neighborhood to park?
Sure, so I can answer that. We will be legally required to provide accessible pedestrian access as part of this development. Where that access comes from, we want to discuss that. This is a concept. We want to propose a project that the city can get behind. So I assume we don't want that to come off of the Leominster connector. I assume we would want pedestrians to be walking on Mechanic Street, but that is open for discussion. Secondly, if we are providing pedestrian access, you know, it would be in a way that it's not designed such that a car could use that. There's nothing stopping a GPS from sending someone that way. I will say we do work regularly with Waze and Google and the other GPS systems. So as part of this project, we could have that discussion and request that they don't send people certain ways. We can't control that, but that is an effort that we could make. And then as far as on event day, if that is the concern about bringing people this way on event day, there will be a very detailed event day management plan. There will be road closures for, you know, local residents only, and there will be signage and there will be information. And quite honestly, if people are coming from the highway to this site, it's going to be easier to use the Leominster connector because you have the interchange right there.
If I could just add to that, Bren.
Yep.
One of the things that Brittany omitted earlier was it's going to be ticketed events. So we're going to know exactly how many people are coming, and they'll be parking for them, or if there's off-site parking, they'll be sent there.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just think we all also understand that when there is even the thought that somebody might be sitting in traffic, we all probably do it. We're going to find the quickest way to get around that traffic.
That's one of the problems that's out there right now on Mechanic Street.
So that's one of my concerns is just we're going to have cars parking in that neighborhood. I'll bet you, and you know, neighbors are not going to be able to access their driveways in their homes, and we're going to all hear about it.
Well, on event days they won't. That's part of the traffic management plan, and we'll have details, police and fire details.
And that would all be paid for by the applicant and required as part of the event day management plan.
Correct.
I guess I'm all set for now.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, Council Cormier.
Thank you very much. I just want to kind of, not to beat a dead horse, which is probably a bad pun in this situation, but to piggyback on what Councilor Cormier and Councilor Bedanza had been talking about in terms of, you know, the initial drilling and, you know, liability bonds. That's been my concern since the minute that I heard about this project. We all know that it's a very sensitive area, and there were at least two of us, maybe three of us. I don't know, Councilor Frieder, if you'll remember, but the mayor decided he was going to let sheep graze up on the landfill years back. And that was a pretty expensive problem for the city. I don't know if people remember that, but they munched the grass right down to the dirt, caused some erosion, and we had to have, I think it was Woodward and Curran, they had to come in here, they had to present the DEP got involved, we had to remediate a problem, and, you know, that's, what, a half a dozen or a dozen sheep that were grazing on this land. We want to park 650 vehicles up there and go in and start drilling and testing and mucking around, and, you know, I just want to be clear, that's a concern of mine. I need to know, you know, how much is the bond? Like, we seem to not know. And, you know, I know and I don't mean to, you know, bring up other projects, but, you know, we've been in the situation before with bonds and unaccepted streets and all these sorts of things. And some of these things are a joke. The city gets nothing. People walk away. So these are serious concerns of mine. Before I allow anyone as a city councilor to go in there and start mucking around with this land. You know, the sheep, since I've been sitting here, cause damage. We all know how sensitive it is. And you know, now you're talking about drilling and all these other things. So if you can elaborate on it more now, I'd like, you know, to be able to elaborate more on it, certainly at the next, you know, public hearing, because these are very serious concerns of mine.
You all set?
I'm good.
Okay, Council Frida.
Marty, quick question. Were you here when we capped the landfill? Were you involved in that?
I was not.
You came right after that, then?
Yeah, I was in the early 2000s.
Do we have a legal obligation to update some of that equipment that's there in 30 years after we capped it? Is there an obligation that we have?
There's an obligation to, as Katie indicated, to continue to monitor it. If there's problems, then I think there would be a discussion with DEP. But, the obligation is to continue to monitor it and make sure that you've got good data suggesting that the material, the equipment's doing what it's supposed to do.
Do we have an idea what that cost might be? I mean, we have monitoring, we have piping with the flare under the roadway going over that we hoped would be enough methane to fuel the treatment plant, which there wasn't enough methane.
Right.
But that whole process, that would all have to be updated or upgraded? Is that what we're saying?
I might defer to Katie on this one.
All right.
I mean, in as much as the project would disturb and require updates, the engineers would need to look at that and upgrade it, yes.
Do we have a ballpark for, I'm saying if we were not to do this, what would our cost be to upgrade that, those situations, what's there now? Do we have just a ballpark of?
I think what are you?
I was just going to offer that what we're talking about is we may need to relocate and modify that piping so that it works with our proposal. If we're not doing the project, then we don't need to modify the system.
Right, I'm trying to get a sense as to if we don't do this project,
Yep.
we're going to have to upgrade and look at what's there now. What's the possible cost to the city to upgrade that?
Sure. So you have ongoing monitoring of the landfill regularly right now. So it would be that continued contract that you have with that consultant.
Right, so if there's like any elements of your flare system that need, say a part lasts 20 years, then you'd be, that kind of typical maintenance that's occurring now, that would be continued in the future.
It's about $104,000 a year the city pays to maintain it.
All right.
It sits now.
Thank you. And just another question regarding the host agreement. I'm going to assume that the mayor has signed that host agreement with you that we got today?
Yes.
There's reference when it talks about the 99-year lease or the lease to you. There's reference on the lease or purchase in a number of different areas. Is there a possibility that there's a discussion about buying the land?
Yes. That was what we talked about. Yes.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we did talk about, that it would be, we'd retain ownership of it.
Okay. And I think, and it's just, I'm sure it's just typos, but I did notice that Attorney Bavenzi, if you move to Monument Square, I mean, I thought you were still at Manning Ave, and I think City Hall is West Street, not 95 Pleasant Street.
I must have typed it. It has those kind of mistakes. Thank you.
All right, I'm good for the moment.
Okay. Councilor Robbins.
I've just got one that's also tied to the host agreement. A lot of the payments to a lot of the $1 million, or which is 1.3 in the new host agreement, is tied to the brick and mortar in-person betting that happens there. If you lose money on the venture, are you still going to make the $1.3 million payment to the city?
Well, if it goes out of business, no. Then what'll happen is
that wasn't necessarily the question. If you're not making what you expect to make,
yeah, then we're obligated to make the payments.
Okay.
As long as we're in business.
Okay.
Jim, just to clarify that, when I read I haven't seen the new one, but the prior draft, the $1 million is contingent upon the racetrack being operational.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yep.
So in listening to, I've been through MIPA process before in a project years ago, and I know how long and painful that can be. So, you know, it's like a 2 or 3 year timeline that the city would be looking to even think about really getting any of that revenue, right? Because that's the permitting process. Then you add a 2-year construction process, probably.
I think there's some breakdown, there's some money before that when it gets permitted, when it gets approved, and I think there's some steps in it, but the regular $1 million, $1.3 million comes when it's fully operational.
That's right. And I know that you know, it's prominently featured in all of the marketing material, and people are very excited about, oh, the city's going to get $1 million. Now the city's going to get $1.3 million. But the city's not going to see any of that money for 4, 5 years.
No.
Well,
If it's a 1 to 2 year permitting process, usually 12 to 18 months is longest on MIPA. It'll take us a year and a half to build it.
okay, so that's like 3+. I think MIPA can be up to 24 months.
I expect the MIPA process will be about a year, and then it'll be another year depending on which permitting process we're talking about. I do anticipate we could have all permits in hand about 2 years after commencing.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, and then a year and a half to construct it, so we're looking at 3.5 years.
Yeah, well, we could
timeline.
probably build the sports bar first and start making payments at some point of that. If Mass Gaming gave us a variance in order to, you know, if we told them we're going to have the racetrack done in a year after that, they might give us a variance and we can start
to do the simulcast betting.
Right.
Okay.
That's the thought process.
Right. But the big money is contingent upon the track being operational.
No, it would be happening then, but we just have to get the track up and going in that variance time.
Right, but the $1 million with $1.3 million is contingent upon the track being operational, according to the HCA.
We could ask for a variance that if we opened up the sports bar, say we were able to get the sports bar done in a year, all right, after permits, and it took 2 years to do the track, we could ask for a variance to be able to start simulcasting and then have that track done in that year. And if we didn't have it done in that year, we'd either have to ask for an extension or they would pull the simulcasting license. One of the two.
Right. But doesn't the ACA tie very specifically the $1.3 million or $1 million to the operation of the track?
Yes.
I mean, there are other payments. I know that there are, you know, there's a combination of personal and property taxes and some other revenue share,
right,
you know, based on the simulcast.
But if we're simulcasting, then the city gets the money, one way or the other. If it doesn't specifically say that, then that's what it will say. But that's our thought process.
Yeah. Good to know. Good to know. I have other questions, and this one's a little bit off of the HCA, and I think it's for you though, Jim. So right now in the Crossroads Office Park, there are 2 ongoing businesses. One's been there. It's a Piccolomondo. It's been there for 37 years. Daycare center that takes care of kids from over 100 families, I think, most of whom are from Leominster.
Sure.
And then there's the Department of Aging office there as well, providing services to all the folks.
A couple other small businesses, too.
Oh, that's right. Yep. So what's the plan for those? Because they're in the building.
Move them to the other building that's empty.
Okay. And in terms of, I know that, you know, Piccolomondo, for example, they just spent a lot of money, $100,000, creating a new playground outside. I mean, who's going to absorb those costs?
Yeah, we're going to move them.
The new build out would be
apples for apples, exactly what they do, because it's the same exact building, so we'll fit it up the same way, same playground.
Okay, all right. That's good. Let me see. In the HCA, it was there are a lot of references to, you know, Bay State Racing and affiliates. Can you define who those are or what those are, the affiliates?
Affiliates as far as in the HCA?
Yeah.
What section is it?
I don't have it in front of me, but I have page 5, 12, 13, and 14. Is where I noted that they refer to Bay State Racing LLC and its affiliates.
In what context, though? What's the affiliates part?
Let me dig. I can dig it out.
Yeah. Do you have that, Tom? scheduling events?
Well, the first one on page 5, and this is, I haven't seen the new draft, so I'm just working from the first one. Under D, community benefits, community use of the facilities. At reasonable times when the facility is not in use by Fairgrounds or its affiliates, Fairgrounds shall provide free of charge community access to the facilities. So it's not just the Fairgrounds, but the affiliates could preempt community use of the space. I'm just curious as to
Yeah,
who
we
the
might
affiliates would be.
rent it out to, you know, like the cricket, we have some cricket people that are interested in doing events there.
Okay.
So if they're signed up to have it regularly, they'd either have to give us a waiver on it, tell them that we got another event, the city's got another event to have.
Let me see where they are. Okay, on page 12, under conditions of Fairgrounds obligations permitting contingency. The obligations of Fairgrounds set forth in this agreement, with the exception of its obligations under Section 2C, are specifically contingent upon receipt of the approvals allowing Fairgrounds or its affiliates to construct and operate live and simulcast horse racing with wagering and sports wagering at the facility on the site. So so the Fairgrounds can, I'm confused about how affiliates would be able to construct and operate live and simulcast horse racing.
Because it might be someone like DraftKings or the other big one that's out there, FanDuel or something like that, they might run the simulcasting piece of it.
Outside of the specific building?
No.
Okay, well, they're online, right? I mean,
right.
People just use those on their phones.
Inside, they actually run the simulcasting part of it in the bar area.
So do you have a list of those affiliates?
What's that?
Do you have a list
No.
of the affiliates?
No, we don't know who it would be. Just saying it might be not the Fairgrounds, it might be someone else that we rent it out to run it.
Right. On page 14, under term, it says, this agreement shall take effect on the effective date and shall remain in effect for as long as Fairgrounds, its affiliates, successors, or assigns operates the facility at the site.
Same thing.
Okay, so, but we don't know who those are. We don't know who they are.
Yeah, once the license comes in, we'll know better.
Madam Chairman, can I just clarify something?
Sure.
On the sports betting side?
Yeah.
Yeah, most of all your other facilities, online and/or your casinos, they all use a sports betting online vendor to supply sports wagering. Just no different than I can have FanDuel on my phone right now.
Right.
So they would work with a provider to provide the application. You wouldn't do it yourself.
Right, but I would see that as being a subcontractor that's providing a service to the Fairgrounds. I wouldn't see that as necessarily an affiliate of the business and having that kind of relationship
I think it's just the wording.
to the business.
I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, yeah, no, I
Most likely your
understand.
licensees for racing don't run the sports betting side. It's
Okay.
usually
Thank you. One other place on page 13 is another affiliates. For early termination, if for any reason Fairgrounds or its affiliates have not received all of the approvals within 48 months after the effective date, then Fairgrounds may, in its sole discretion upon notice to the city, terminate this agreement. And it goes on. So it's interesting because it says, if for any reason Fairgrounds or its affiliates have not received all the approvals, then Fairgrounds can terminate the agreement. Which affiliates would be receiving approvals to move the project forward?
Could be same thing. DraftKings, whoever runs the simulcasting, FanDuel.
Okay, that's still, I'm not clear about that, so I'll have to, some clarity on that. I'm not I don't really understand that, so I think some clarity would be helpful. Sorry?
What section was that?
Page 13, under B, early termination. Section 11, B.
Everything has to go to the gaming commission. If the gaming commission doesn't approve, they might approve Fairgrounds, they might not approve FanDuel, they might not approve DraftKings. If they don't approve it, then there's no simulcasting. So that
One
would
thing
be the
here,
affiliate.
it's not directly related, but from the horseman's perspective, we, with the licensee, have to apply every year to the commission to get approval to run a race meet.
Right.
Every year you have to apply.
Right.
I just want to be clear, so.
But
yeah.
Fairgrounds would be the entity that would be getting the license from the Mass Gaming Commission, correct? Or Bay State Racing LLC?
No, it could be FanDuel. FanDuel.
So you'd be subcontracting?
Yeah, it could be one of them.
But, so you'd be subcontracting that part of the business to?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And then if the horse, something goes wrong with the horses and they pull the license from there or don't give them a license for some reason, then you can't get the simulcasting license. They're all
Okay.
contingent upon each other.
Okay, I'll come back to that.
I think the issue there is we don't get to approve the affiliate.
We don't?
I don't think so. I mean, I
We
think that's
don't, but
what.
it would be nice to know who
Well,
are
I
the
mean,
affiliates.
Yeah, well, the point is even if we knew who the, I mean, they may not know who the affiliates are. So what they're admitting, but the point is, more important point is, we don't get to approve them,
Oh.
right?
Yeah, no, we don't. That's right.
Whoever it's going to be is going to be approved through Mass Gaming, so
But Leominster doesn't get to approve them.
what do they have? I don't know if they have a. Yeah, I mean, that's probably something we could put in the host community agreement if we had to. Can be talked about.
I do have one other question. I'm just trying to find the reference. I think in the zoning change, actually in the zoning ordinance language, there were other gaming activities that, let me find it. Just let me see. I can't find it at the moment, but I'll get that too. There was a reference to other, including other gaming activities, and I just wanted to know if you could define that.
Whatever's approved under Mass Gaming.
So is your intent to apply, when you apply for a license, for more than the racetrack and the simulcast betting? What other kinds of activities would you be applying for?
Could be the lottery, Keno, whatever.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Council Noseworthy, do you, okay.
Yeah, just one more quick question. Thank
yeah,
you,
go ahead.
Madam Chair. I don't remember if I saw it in the second version of the host agreement, but I think you talk about a little bit about having some therapeutic use of some horses, maybe hippotherapy, things like that. So it got me to thinking, I didn't know, obviously you're not using race horses for therapy because those are two very different horses in training. So I was just curious, are those horses also just going to be kept on site? Are you also going to subcontract? Because with hippotherapy, I know sometimes, people take Mass Health, there's all those pieces. So I was just curious what your thoughts are about the therapeutic portion of, the hippotherapy.
Yeah, there was a
and
thought to have a couple of horses there year-round to use as therapy horses for kids, for whatever use that, for educational purposes, having programs in the school with it.
They can contract with Gamma. Sean Hayden is here. And they have therapeutic with animals, therapeutic programs. It can be contracted.
Okay, because that was my question.
That would be an affiliate.
Yeah, that was my question. Are these going to be programs that are free to the public, or are they going to be Mass Health-based, Medicaid-based? Like
Free to the
what that was going to look like?
And hopefully in the schools, something would be.
If I can add to that from the horseman's perspective.
Sure.
I'm huge on therapeutic aftercare because my niece's nephew was on the autism spectrum. And I told her, get him on a horse. And
Right.
it just did wonders for him. So we also, as part of just 6 days of racing, not only fund, as I said, towards Mass Tesla General Clinic, we pledge for thoroughbred aftercare and therapeutic programs. So we would, through racing, allocate the funding we get and make donations, whether it's on site if it permits it, but I'm looking for other surrounding farms in Leominster that could offer therapeutic programs, retirement programs, that if anybody has to abandon a horse, we would take the horse in, no questions asked, and we would help fund that for that farm or the care of a horse. And I rescue horses probably 4 to 6 every year that I know are in trouble. So that's on our world. very, very huge and important to us. So whether it's on-site, if it permits, because I know you're still doing the study, I personally would work with the investors to look at area, Gamma, other sites that we can help sponsor and offer those programs, whether it's, like you said, for those that can't afford it, et cetera.
Okay, so what
Because
you're...
that does give, to be clear, as you said, that is second careers for your horses, whether they're riding
Sure,
horses,
when they're
show
done with their
horses,
racing
jumps,
careers.
right.
Right, because obviously you're not going to have a racehorse be a therapy horse. So it sounds like depending upon how things move forward, you would be open to having the horses on site or contracting out with other people that would bring those horses on to the fairgrounds.
Yeah, we're hoping to have it on site.
Okay.
That was the thought.
Yeah, I was just curious. Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
And that was one of the buildings that is shown on the Crossroads property where the paddock is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Council Frida.
I guess since it hasn't come up, I'm going to try to address the elephant in the room. We've heard many things, and I don't do Facebook, thank God, but I hear it from everybody. Mr. Fields has been brought up many times by a number of different people. We know you. We know the people that you're associated with around the table. We don't know Mr. Fields, and all we know is what we hear about him. Can you touch on that? It's an opportunity to clarify your position and your involvement with him and your partnership with him.
Yeah, Richard Fields is a consultant. Everybody was looking for exactly what everybody does. Richard Fields is a consultant to this project right now. He's got extensive knowledge in the horse part of it. With helping to start HISA. He actually did a bio. It's on our website, that his complete career of everything he's done. I think if people read through that, they see a little bit different than what I hear is on Facebook, because I don't look at it either. But yeah, if you take a look at that, he did a nice long bio, and it explains everything he's done in his career and helping horse racing and fixing Suffolk Downs. I mean, there's talk about he got sued for a couple of things down at Suffolk Downs. Well, those were existing issues that were there that he came in and actually fixed. So all of that is in there, in his bio.
So let's just take a scenario. If he's just a consultant with you, that's all he is with you?
Yes, at this point, yeah.
So if he walks away from your project 5 years from now, and it's your project, it's not going to affect anything?
Nope.
Or if anything happens with him, it's not going to affect
Correct.
your project?
Yep, it's got nothing to do with it.
All right, thank you.
Jim, can you just talk a little bit more about Bay State Racing LLC then? If Mr. Fields is a consultant and you're the managing partner, I mean, who is part of that group, and what exactly are they
Want to deal with that?
doing?
Yep.
So the investors, it's a capital management company, Hollingcrest. They're registered on the SEC. So they're wealth advisors, and they're providing the equity capital for the venture, basically.
That's it?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
They are Bay State Racing?
They are the equity investors in Bay State Racing LLC. It's the Hollingcrest Capital Management Group. And again, it's a registered wealth management group on the SEC.
That's where the funding is coming from.
You look for the equity the investors, yes.
Okay. So there's the equity company, and there's yourself?
Yep, and I'm a managing partner in there, so I have shares in Bay
Okay.
State.
And then who else? Is Mr. Fields part of the LLC? Or is
Nope.
he? No?
Nope, he's just a consultant at this
Okay.
point.
So it's just you?
And the investors.
So that group is an investment.
There's several.
It's a
Yeah.
capital, it's an investment wealth group, so they have.
Right. No, I understand how those work. I'm just, but in terms of the project, it's just you?
Here, yeah.
Okay.
Presenting it. I'm the person that's going to be the face of it. Now, if it gets approved and while it's being built, then run. I'm on the board.
Mhm.
We'll have managers that are running it,
Mhm.
management company maybe.
Mhm. Who else has any ownership stake?
Oh, I don't have every name in the, do we have all the, I don't think we have a list of all the names.
I don't
that are
have
in it.
that.
I don't even know if some of them are public names.
Okay, thanks. All right, anybody else have any questions before we wrap it up?
Madam Chair, just one last question.
Sure.
Looking at the host agreement, I didn't see it per se, but I was just curious for, even though people are asking questions, what additional, if any, cost to the taxpayer would this look like? And do you have like the total cost of the project?
We're thinking it's around $40 million at this point.
40 million? Okay.
Just a rough estimate.
Anybody else?
Madam Chair, can I just
Certainly.
couple things?
Yeah, of course.
You asked earlier, I wanted to be clear, did you say there was no racing in Massachusetts or a specific?
Thoroughbred.
Okay, yes.
'Cause there is
20
harness
minutes
racing.
down the road, the standardbreds.
Of course, yeah.
Little
Yeah.
sulkies, and they run 100 days a year.
Yeah, no.
And then were we all clear on simulcasting? Because I know we don't, the comment made about not having a simulcast pilot, but again, because of technology, I can log in right now and bet any track that's running live racing from here to Japan to Hong Kong to
Absolutely.
Australia.
Right.
So whether you're here or technically there's just a physical facility where you punch a ticket. Here I can bet it and have an account. And by the way, for when you talk about gaming sets, and you can set limits for those individuals that you can only bet so much.
Mhm.
And that's part of the commission controls that through Game Sense, and not so much Gamblers Anonymous, but Game Sense.
Jen, can you speak to, finish that up? Finish up over there.
And the last thing, if you didn't see it, so when Suffolk Downs officially closed in 2014, we the Horsemen ran the 6 days festivals. I think it's important because we created family-friendly fun activities with food truck festivals and pony rides and face painters and music and classic cars. And it was a great day for 6 days where people came out and enjoyed themselves for the day. And that's what we would hope to expect to see that the city could benefit from. And as much as we think we run for purses, I can tell you when us owners come to town to see our horses race, we will spend money on food, gas, and your restaurants here in Leominster. So they usually will come in, spend a day or two, and we'll leave. We get in and out.
Thank you.
So I think a couple of things about the gaming piece of this is, one, as it was said earlier, definitions do matter, right? Definitions of simulcasting and sports wagering and racing licenses and all of that, which is spelled out through the Mass Gaming Commission. When we legalized gaming back in 2011, we were very specific. It's one of the most regulated industries in Massachusetts. From my background, I'd like to say it's even more regulated than the cannabis industry, which I helped stand up in this state.
Oh, we'll agree with that. I'll agree with that.
But I think one of the things that we talk about, and Madam Chair, to your point of, who's going to be the affiliate inside, who's going to run maybe that piece of it, you don't know yet because we don't have the plan yet because no one has the licenses. It's not concrete yet. But one of the other things I will tell you is that it is age gated. And age gating is very important because you can have people who are lying on their phones saying that they're old enough to bet and they can start doing all these things on their phones. When you're in an actual facility, you can age gate, you can check IDs, you can see how old they are, you can make provisions if children are in the building, the same way the casinos do, right? Their kids can't be allowed on the floor, be on the ropes, but they can be allowed in the building. This is the same type of thing. And I think one of the things that we're looking to talk about today is the fact that you see these people sitting here because we want to do this responsibly. You can hear the snickers, you can hear the talking, you can hear all the chatter, but the reality is you want the experts on the ground. You want to pay for the experts to do the jobs that they are certified to do and that they have done. And I think with this project, if you look at the renderings over there on the picture, this is going to be a recreational facility for families, for our community, and quite frankly, for the region. And I think that's one of the biggest things. You have a huge decision to make as leaders of our community that are going to significantly impact our region. and more specifically, the people that are local to us. Nettie Latimer is here from the Spanish Center. You had members of Local 1841 firefighters here. You have Gamma here, when Sean, who really works through all the therapeutic things that we're talking about. You have local people who are on the ground supporting this. And they are big groups of people. And others like to say, oh, well, you have unions coming in. We're a blue-collar community. The unions make up the backbone of our community. People travel 30 and 40 miles away from this city to go to work to get jobs. This project allows us to create a facility where we're going to create jobs here in Leominster, not only for Leominster residents, for people that are in the region, but also provide a space where our local community organizations can go. We've talked about having an ice rink in the winter because we have a huge hockey league here. And kids are traveling all over the place to play hockey, and it's expensive for parents. Why not have something here that's local? We want to talk about, morals and ethics. Gaming is a piece of our community. It is here. So isn't tobacco and nicotine, so isn't alcohol, so isn't cannabis, so isn't the lottery. You have a right as a consumer to choose what you participate in, and we also have the right to choose that we're making money from this. I said this before when I testified before the City Council. We had $6.7 million in unrestricted local aid in 2024. A lot of that comes from gaming. We have 64 businesses in Leominster that have the lottery. Are we trying to say people can't play the lottery the same way they can't simulcast, or the same way they can't sports bet or wager online? It's already here. And we also, as a state, have the parameters in place through GameSense and through the Responsible Gaming Commission and all of that, where people can get help. And according to the Mayo Clinic, which is very well regarded, there are methods that people can handle their gaming addiction with antidepressants if you choose the medicated route. I will not go on my addiction tangent because I could be here for hours, but there are options that people have, whether it's behavioral or medicated assisted, and you get to choose that. This is another facility that we're looking at here in Leominster, where we're going to have open space. You're going to have green grass. You're going to drive into the city of Leominster and look and see that there is a piece of land that we've finally been able to develop. All while at the same time paying attention to the fact that people live in that neighborhood. People drive up and down Mechanic Street. People want to make sure that people are safe, and we're going to have walkways and sidewalks and the like. It is a long-term plan. This isn't a short-term goal. The goal isn't to just open and then have the place go bankrupt. This is a long-term plan for the viability of not only that space, for some of the options that we have for here in our community. How many times do we have to complain about another thing downtown where the streets are all tied off? People can't get to businesses, people can't get through the city. This is an option, and you as the leaders of our community have a huge, huge decision to make. I know Mr. Whitney has offered to meet with you individually to talk about the details, to answer all the questions you have. I know you've received emails with the packets and the reports that we have. We want to share everything we have so you have the information to make an informed decision. This may be one of the biggest decisions we've had to make in this city for one of the biggest projects. And so we're hoping that you'll consider having the communication, talking, asking the questions that you're asking tonight, but even digging down deeper into what the environmental impacts are. It can be done. We're hoping that we can have a dialogue not only now, but going forward, and answer any of the questions that you have on any piece of this, because it's going to be a partnership. It's not a one-man job. And we wouldn't want it to be, because people who live here and people who work here and people who want to move here, we have the ability to help them by adding additional space, and not only that, additional revenue. How are we paying for Fulbrick? How are we going to do some of the big ticket items that have to be done in this city without raising people's taxes? The HCA that you have in front of you went from $1 million to $1.3 million. I think it's $250,000 of that is going to go to veterans and disabled people and elderly to help pay their taxes, because people are having a hard time staying in their homes. This is truly a community event. It's a community effort. It's a community project. And we just hope that if you have any questions that you'll continue to talk and ask us.
I think, everybody good? Good. I just want to say thank you very much. Is there anything, Jim, that you'd like to say that didn't come up, or you'd like to?
No, I'd just like to add that I would like to sit down with it. If anybody's got any questions, it would be great to just go through them. in more details instead of waiting till the next meeting that maybe we'll have a vote on and not be able to dig deep into those.
Right.
If you got any questions, email them over, call us, I can sit down and just clear them all up.
I think that's a real challenge for us now that we have something that we'll be voting on in 2 weeks, perhaps, to meet individually with people. I mean, we have to do things in the public forum.
Sure.
And that's why we had the subcommittee meeting tonight, because we're trying to find the facts, we're trying to get questions answered, we're trying to understand, things that aren't clear.
Email the questions over.
Absolutely.
Email, yeah. Email them, call.
Oh, we can email them through the clerk, perhaps. I mean, in order to do it, in a way that is.
Whatever way you need to answer your questions. Like, we got plenty of experts that can deal with this stuff, so we can't answer them if we don't know. That's why I've been waiting for this for 3 months.
Well, I do want to thank everybody for coming out.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you very much, and other councilors, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you, for all of you for coming out. I really appreciate your expertise. It was good. But I just have one more comment. You met, because we ended on this note on gambling, and there was a 10-year study done on the impact of legalizing casinos in Massachusetts. This was an article from October 25th, 24, so it's a little old, but it was by New England Public Media, and it talked about casino gambling. But then at the end, it said that the authors that did this study wanted to stress that positive feelings in the report should not be applied to sports betting or online gambling, which was legalized more recently, as the economic benefits of these formats appear to be much smaller, and the risk of social harm is likely much greater due to the lack of prior exposure. So if we want to talk about working with people to get their medication to help manage their gambling addiction, that, is something that I just don't feel great about. So on that note, again, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Umbrello, for the information that you provided. I appreciate that. And
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn. So, Frank seconded. All those in favor? Yeah.
The Leominster City Council meeting is funded in part by the Carolus Insurance Agency at www.thecarolusinsuranceagency.com and by Avidia Bank at www.avidiabank.com.